starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Vice Chairman, sir, in the course of his reply, the Honorable Minister referred to some of the remarks made on the 18th while replying to question number 4, and he said that his remarks were misunderstood by some of the members. Sir, I really admire my honorable friend for making a reference to it, but if I say that some ministers in the Council of Ministers at the center are wise, how you will take it? Of course, in his buoyancy, he made that statement. I do not know whether he really intended it, but it only meant that some members in the opposition are wise and some are foolish. Of course, taken in a lighter vein, it means nothing, but I think such a statement as a whole could have been avoided. Now, sir, I welcome some of the statements made by him, and I submit that in April the vacancies were 64 and in July the vacancies were 67. According to his own analysis of the disease of areas and pendency of cases in the Supreme Court and in the High Courts, the judge strength was less and therefore this backlog is there. Now the pendency as on 31st December 1987 was 5.5 lakhs. It has now exceeded 6 lakhs. On that day, in the Delhi High Court, the pendency was 2000 odd. Now the pendency is over 25,000. The sanctioned strength of the Delhi High Court is 18 permanent judges and 3 additional judges. The Delhi High Court has 5 service judges, out of whom 2 are from outside. In principle, I have no objection to judges being brought from other states, but of the 5 service judges, at least 2 are to be from outside. That means 3 are from Delhi. The judges from the subordinate judiciary do not get any chance of promotion. I have worked it out and I find that promotion is given to only about 40% of the judges from the service cadre. Therefore, they do not have the necessary incentive. I think something has to be done in this regard also to give proper incentives to the judges from the subordinate judiciary. If among the subordinate judiciary there are efficient and competent people, they should be promoted as High Court judges. Of course, it will boost the morale of these judges. In fact, we have seen that many Supreme Court judges who are doing very well have been promoted from the subordinate judiciaries. I would like to give some examples. Judge of the Supreme Court was at one time session judge. Another judge started his career as a subordinate judge. Similarly, my friend started his career as a civil judge. There are many such instances. I could even cite the example of another judge who delivered that famous judgment. He was also a district judge and he was a promotee judge in the High Court. Therefore, my point is sufficient efforts should be made to give incentive to subordinate judiciary. The Honorable Law Minister has analyzed the disease and he has found that all these backlogs or areas are primarily due to the vacancies in the high courts. He has also said that the judge strength is not as much as it should be, and by way of an example, he said about the Karnataka High Court, where the sanctioned strength is 14 plus 3 additional judges. This comes to 17, but their requirement is 33. Similarly, if you work out the requirement of judges in each high court, taking into consideration the quota of disposal fixed by the Chief Justice's Conference, namely 650 per year, we find that the judges' strength in each high court has to be increased every year. This is because the arrears go on mounting up. This is a constant problem. Every year we cannot go on speaking about this. It is necessary that efforts should be made to tackle this problem of arrears, and this can only be done by appointing suitable number of judges. In this connection, I would like to point out one thing. I could not understand one thing which the Honorable Law Minister said in the course of his answers the other day. He said that proper judges were not appointed. I could not really understand what he meant by the words proper judges. For the appointment of judges, there is a specific provision in the Constitution. Certain minimum qualification must be there. Firstly, a recommendation is made by the state government in consultation with the Chief Justice of the concerned High Court. Then the appointment is made. All this is known to the Honorable Law Minister. The same procedure has been followed. Therefore, when he made this observation that proper judges were not appointed, I would expect a gentleman like my friend who now occupies the office of the Law Minister not to make such statements which may create confusion in the minds of the people and the House. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. We all have gathered here for an important conference. It is important in the first instance because it is the first meeting of the state ministers of rural development, rural housing and Panchayati Raj after my government took office in New Delhi. Hence, I must at the very outset both welcome you to this conference and thank you for giving me this opportunity to meet important representatives of the state government. But a greater reason that lends importance to this conference is its subject. Rural development, rural housing, and Panchayati Raj constitute an interdependent set of concerns which are at the very heart of India's present and future national development. Precisely because of this reason, they are at the heart of the national agenda for governance, which is the blueprint of my government's policies and priorities. To explain the importance of rural development in the context of our common dream of building a new India is to belabor the obvious. India is a land of villages. Between 60 and 70% of our population live in villages and is engaged in agriculture and allied activities. When it is said that India is an ancient nation and this fact makes all of us proud, it is well recognized that what constitutes her rich heritage is her village based culture and agriculture. It is on the solid foundation of this ancient culture that India is emerging as a potentially strong and modern economy. I have used the term potentially with deliberate intent and emphasizes. It points to a historic possibility well within our reach. It also powerfully reminds us that the possibility of India becoming a strong economy and a strong nation depends crucially on the attention we pay to the all round development of our villages and our agriculture. This is where the subject of today's conference assumes its paramount importance. I would even go as far as to say that both from a short term and long term point of view, ministries of rural development, rural housing, and Panchayati Raj are the most important ministries in our union and state governments. I wish to underscore this core belief of mine because it goes against conventional wisdom and practice hitherto followed. Rural development is the engine of India's national development. For most parts of the post independence history, rural development did not figure as a national priority in terms of either financial investments or administrative attention. The result is there for all to see. Our food production has failed to catch up with the growth of our population, making food security a critical dimension of our national security. Public investment in agriculture and irrigation is nearly stagnant. Of those living in areas, as many as 25 crore people live below the poverty line. We need as many as 2 crore houses to be built up, upgraded in rural areas in order to provide decent habitat to our rural poor. A majority of the houseless or ill housed people villages belong to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. Deprived of gainful and sustainable employment in the villages of their origin, millions of them migrate to towns and cities each year. There too, they live a life of deprivation. Let us look at another face of the contemporary Indian reality. We pride ourselves in being the largest democracy in the world, and rightly so. But what is the health of our democracy at the grassroots level in our village panchayats? We have to admit that we as a nation have failed to tend the roots. When the roots are not well nourished, the tree cannot be very healthy. Thus, we see a cruel paradox. Village India, which has sustained our culture and economy, has been condemned to the state of backwardness. I am not here criticizing anybody or any party or any government. Let us admit that this has been our collective failure as a nation, and let us use the recognition of this bitter truth as the basis of a strong national consensus to give the top priority to rural development. We have stated in the national agenda that we will give a human face to the national development efforts with poverty eradication as the ultimate goal and removal of unemployment as the means. We have set for ourselves the goal of Berozgari Hatao, and we recognize that To achieve this goal, we have to upgrade the attack on unemployment and poverty into a national movement. Specifically, we are committed to provide drinking water to every village. We are committed to making our country hunger free in the next 10 years. Towards this end, we will be earmarking 60% of the plan funds for agriculture, rural development, and irrigation. Besides, we have stated that in our endeavor to facilitate construction of 20 lakh new housing units each year for the very poor people. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Honorable members, keeping in mind the desire of the youth to be self-reliant, the Kaushal Vikas Abhiyan was launched. Under this Abhiyan, in the last 4 years, on an average, 1 crore youth have been trained every year in different skills. In the coming days, more than 15,000 ITIs, more than 10,000 Kaushal Vikas Kendras, and more than 600 Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Kendras will play a critical role in developing the skill set of the country's youth. Under the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, which facilitates credit for professional and business requirements, loans worth more than rupees 7 lakh crore have been disbursed to the youth without any guarantee. More than 15 crore people have benefited and over 4 crore 26 lakh first time borrowers have started their business under this scheme. Under Startup India and Stand Up India, my government has provided financial assistance to make the youth self-reliant. As a result, in the world of startups, India now figures as a frontline country. The government has linked creation of jobs with tax incentives under Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Protsahan Yojana. Under this scheme, when a young person gets a new job, the EPS and EPF contribution of 12% payable by the employer is being paid by the government for the first 3 years. More than 1 crore youth have already benefited from this scheme. Every parent aspires for a good education for their sons and daughters so that they can succeed in life. Government is establishing new educational institutions to provide increased opportunities for professional education of the highest standard. 7 IITs, 7 IIMs, 14 IITs, and others are being established. It has been decided to enhance the amount of scholarship and fellowship by more than 25% to encourage research activity in the country. In addition, efforts are being made to further strengthen the foundation of the education system by opening 100 Kendriya Vidyalayas, Ekalavya Model Avasiya Vidyalayas in all talukas having a majority tribal population and 62 new Navodaya Vidyalayas. To improve the standard of education, government is following a multidimensional approach. To secure the future of the country, it is imperative that children still studying in schools get full opportunity to transform their imagination into concrete reality. Honorable members, with changing times and evolving technology, methods, and processes of employment and business are also changing. My government is constantly working to ensure the preparedness of youth of our country for such changes. My government is making efforts to identify talented sportsmen from different corners of this country under the youth centric Khelo India program. Transparency in selection processes has boosted the morale of our sportspersons. The result is reflected in the number of medals won by us at national and international levels. Our daughters are making remarkable contribution in every field today and have brought laurels to the country. It is for the first time since independence that the policies and programs of the government have created numerous new opportunities for enterprise for women and led to their empowerment and economic mainstreaming under the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana. The maximum benefit has been availed by women. Out of the 15 crore Mudra loans provided so far throughout the country, 73% have been disbursed to women entrepreneurs. Under the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, about 6 crore women have become members of the self-help groups. My government has provided loans worth more than rupees 75,000 crore to such self-help groups. This amount is 2.5 times more than the loans given in the 4 years proceedings 2014. In order to ensure the participation of women entrepreneurs in small and medium enterprises, it has been made mandatory for the major government companies to purchase at least 3% of their materials from the enterprises owned by women entrepreneurs. My government is also making efforts to address the problem of gender based discrimination faced by women in different spheres. Last year, a decision was taken whereby women officers recruited under the Short Service Commission in the armed forces would be considered for permanent commission through a transparent selection process just like their male counterparts. Women who had been deprived of employment opportunities in the underground mining sector even after so many years of independence will now be given equal opportunity to work in this sector. To enable working women to devote more time towards the upbringing of their new born children during the crucial formative years, the government has enhanced maternity leave from 12 weeks to 26 weeks. Despite the scorching sun, heavy downpour, snowfall, or any other challenge, the hard-working farmers of our country have toiled day and night to produce record food grain harvest. There has also been an increase in dairy and fish production as also in other areas. Many of you have witnessed village life and the struggles of the farmers. Our farmers are not only the foundation of our economy but they also keep our traditions alive. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I am pleased to be here with you to inaugurate the ambitious new project. This is a bold experiment in mobilizing people's action for poverty eradication and social justice. It is revolutionary yet peaceful, well planned yet human, simple in conception yet powerful in potential. I congratulate the government and the people of Kerala for designing a poverty eradication program with such tremendous potential. With this new initiative, Kerala has given yet another big push to its progressive tradition. Your state has always prided itself in the high quality of life enjoyed by its majority. By focusing on creation of human capital, giving priority to education, health, food security, and social security. Kerala has the best indicators of human development in the country. With this project, your state has begun a novel venture to bring the benefits of social development to the disadvantaged section in society that has still remained poor. This approach is in keeping with Kerala's traditional success in achieving social development through the process of awareness building, public demand, and government response. However, new project goes beyond what has been done before because for the first time it makes the members of the scheme an integral part of it. Most important of all, you have made women at the local level leaders and implementers of this scheme. Frankly, I cannot think of any such poverty alleviation program in the country which combines the multiple social objectives of women's empowerment, grassroots participation in a Panchayati Raj framework, neighborhood networking, democratic accountability, and increasing savings. I see several opportunities in the new project. The ban of our poverty alleviation programs has been that they are mostly supply driven with subsidies being doled out from above without considering local needs and possibilities. This marks a refreshing change in that it gives primacy to self help and only an sporting role to governmental subsidies. By promoting thrift, it affords opportunities for attractive credit from banks besides teaching prudence to the poor families. Group savings and group action can remove the curse of moneylenders. Since the whole system is organized transparently, the thrift and saving groups can become informal banks for the poor and of the poor. This project has a great advantage due to its focus on women. Poor women are the best savers and the most careful spenders. They do not borrow indiscriminately and become heavily indebted to the lender. Contrast this with the practice of big borrower who together owe as much as rupees 45,000 crore to the banks. Our entire banking system is under pressure because of these non-performing assets. My government is seriously considering effective steps to recover these bad debts. I only hope that the big borrowers learn from our poor village women and the dharma of repaying loans. Group action by women will facilitate planning from below. The people's groups serve as watchdog to keep the track of public spending. Their growth is restricted only by the innovations that the groups are capable of coming up with. I don't see this as a mere inauguration of a governmental program. I see it as the launching of a social movement for change capable of becoming a sustainable and irresistible force for liberation and progress. I exhort the women's group to be active and alert to accrue conflicts to be prudent in borrowing and intelligent in investing and to acquire skills and grow in confidence. These organizations should strive to recreate the traditional village harmony even while achieving progress and strive to attain Gandhiji's vision of Swaraj. If only our governments can design and implement more such schemes, we will be able to remove the distrust in people's mind and restore their faith in our institutions. It is in the fitness of things that this state wide program is being inaugurated in the district of Malappuram, which is one of the backward districts of Kerala. I understand that there has been a pilot project for some time and that the lessons learned have been incorporated into the statewide new program. Dear friends, different states have many impressive programs for poverty alleviation and rural development. They each have a unique approach to solving the specific problems of their areas. This is a genuine decentralization of developmental action. My government shall fully back all such programs. We will also encourage the states to learn from each other so that we eradicate poverty quickly. While I wholeheartedly congratulate the government of Kerala for this model scheme, permit me to point out few problems that all poverty alleviation programs are facing in the country. The low growth in industrial and agricultural sectors and the growing unemployment have created a strain on the government in its efforts to maintain the social infrastructure that has been created. Rural infrastructure has been especially neglected. Without a stringent infrastructure, it is difficult to support and sustain primary, secondary, and tertiary income generation activities. But infrastructure improvement needs resources. Generating these resources is not easy. This is a challenge that India needs to face squarely in the future. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, there are three items which are covered by this bill. I support the three items because this bill symbolizes and represents a new national development of having a consensus on certain basic questions. It is also a happy augury that the approach is not a negative approach and it is not being said that the preamble of the constitution insofar it has been changed by the 42nd amendment in respect of its secular or socialistic character shall go. It is not said that the list of fundamental duties shall go. It is not said that the directive principles which were amended to provide for workers' representation or for legal aid or for conservation of natural resources will go. That is a healthy development. So far as the Congress party is concerned, it has approached the question with an open mind. Regarding the government proposal with regard to internal security, the Congress party has made it clear as a result of experience that it is opposed to internal disturbances as such and it is against the retention of a clause as to internal disturbances in the event of the armed rebellion. As a result of recent experience, we as the Congress party stand by those provisions of the 42nd Amendment, such as the amendment to the preamble or the directive principles, and we also say that there should be no power in Parliament to declare an internal emergency. But I would like the Law Minister to consider this question not merely from the point of view of the 42nd Amendment, but from the point of view that the Constitution should become a dynamic instrument of socio-economic change to deal with the basic questions that are before the nation. Why did we think of the constitutional amendments? Why did the first constitutional amendment come? Why did Panditji come to the parliament with the first constitutional amendment? It was because our legislation for the abolition of zamindari was struck down. Why did Pandit Nehru come to parliament in 1955 with the fourth constitutional amendment? Again, it was because our socio-economic legislations were struck down. Therefore, when we consider a constitutional amendment, we have to consider the problems that had arisen. Certain property rights, which became part of the fundamental rights, had stood in the way of various socio-economic legislations like land reforms, etc. Sir, we find that in the Golaknath's case, it was laid down that Parliament had no power to alter the fundamental rights, which included the right to property. Sir, you would recall in the Golaknath case, the justice had said that if the aim was to introduce a socialistic pattern of society, then it was a mistake to incorporate property as a fundamental right. It is that mistake which was revealed in 1950 when land legislations were struck down. It is that mistake which was revealed in 1953 when in Bela Banerjee's case the Supreme Court said that full compensation has to be paid. It is to rectify that mistake that in 1955 Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. It is that mistake that resulted in the setting aside by the Supreme Court in February 1970 of the Banks Nationalization Act. It is that mistake that resulted in setting aside in December 1970 of the provision for the abolition of the privy purses. Today, sir, when we discuss this question, we have to discuss the basic question of the conflict that arose as a result of Golaknath's case, by which the property right became supreme and by which the power of Parliament to amend was nullified. With regard to that, we must have a fresh look. The Supreme Court in that important case tried to take a second look and overruled the Golaknath's case, and that there is a concept of the basic structure of the Constitution. What happened in the Golaknath's case? Parliament's right to amend the Constitution, the fundamental right, was taken away. In that important case, a doctrine of basic structure was introduced. But the doctrine of basic structure, as now developed by the Supreme Court, is undefined and it is unchannelized. The question has now come before the Parliament to finally decide on these basic questions. First, we have to decide what is this basic structure. There has been two urges before the Parliament. One is the socialistic urge to fight against inequality and to introduce socio-economic legislation. The obstacle here has been the fundamental right to property. There is another urge of Parliament, that is the democratic urge to preserve life and liberty. This should also be given place in our constitution by the Indian Parliament. The property right, which stood in the way of bank nationalization, stood in the way of abolition of the privy purses, and also stood in the way of abolition of the zamindari system that has to go in totality. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the other day when I initiated the debate, I spoke only for 5 minutes, and during that time I made a reference to Article 39 of the Constitution. I also submitted that in a period of 51 years of our independence, states could not implement the directive principles with reference to that. I also made a mention of the exception of the West Bengal government and the government of Maharashtra. I was discussing the question as to the necessity of the introduction of this particular bill. I said at that time that on many occasions we referred to the problems abroad. For example, when there is a price rise, it is usually said that there is a price rise in all countries and therefore we cannot help it. It is with reference to this I would also like to invite the attention of this august House and the Honorable Minister as to what is the position abroad. As far as this is concerned, if we have a look to other constitutions, a reference of which has been made to the constitutions of the world, we find there are about 21 countries in the world wherein this right to work has been recognized, and out of these 21 countries, China, Japan, USSR are there. Not only this, Ireland, from whom we took the inspiration for independence, has also included this right to work as a constitutional right. Not only this, but there are other countries also who, though have not included the right to work as a fundamental right in the constitution, have provided for unemployment benefits. We find that there are about 28 countries which include Switzerland, Sweden, and Australia. It is because of this I would request the Honorable Minister for Law and Justice to consider the constitutions of these particular countries who have recognized this particular right, and then consider whether the time has not come after 51 years of independence, and especially when we could not implement the directive principles, whether the time has not come now to consider very seriously this particular problem as to whether this right should be enshrined in our constitution as one of our fundamental right. As far as our country is concerned, the government of West Bengal unanimously passed a resolution to this effect without exception of all the parties. I would also like to invite the attention of the House to Rule 23 of the Declaration of Human Rights, which makes a provision of this right to work and a directive has been given that all developing countries should provide such a right as a fundamental right in their constitution. This matter was debated. There was an amendment to refer the matter to a select committee. The matter was referred to a select committee, but in the meantime, Parliament was dissolved. I would appeal to the Law Minister to accept the amendment of my friend, the founding father of our Constitution, in the Constituent Assembly, said that political democracy cannot survive without economic and social democracy. It is in this background also that we have to take into consideration this particular aspect. The demand for this right to work to be included in the Constitution has been made by many youth organizations. The Janta Yuva Morcha, Yuva Janta Morcha, and the Congress Youth Organization and other youth organizations have all passed resolutions in 1996 and 1997 and requested the government to include this particular right in the Constitution. Not only that, I believe that there is no opposition to this bill because my honorable friend, who is not to be seen here now, has introduced a similar bill number 81 of 1997, where he mentions that where a citizen is not provided with work to enable him to earn his livelihood, the state shall render him assistance with unemployment allowance. When a similar bill was moved in the last parliament, the present minister was very eloquent in his support and said that they should be included in the constitution immediately. I do not know whether he has changed his mind because of the change of his position from this side to that side. I believe not. There is one more to which I would like to invite the attention of the House Justice Khanna when he was addressing the 15th annual convocation of Punjab University, said the commitment relating to right to work under Article 39 and 41 has in the face of mounting unemployment a strange ring of irony. These articles, he said, pose a question for all those who had been in charge of the affairs of the state as to how far they have carried out the mandate. He pleaded for solid hard work for carrying out the constitutional mandate. Lastly, there was a public demonstration by all the youths before the house of the Prime Minister here. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, if all financial powers are distributed to the states and all sources of taxation are divided between the states, then how is this to be done? Therefore, even though the government of India collects several taxes, it is not as if they are all used for central government purposes. They are transferred to the states and not transferred in any way. A finance commission sits every 5 years and they suggest how it is to be done and that is accepted. Then there is again the planning commission. If the country is to develop as a whole, unless there is a central planning commission, the states will go on doing things differently for different areas and there will be, I am afraid, not development but cancellation of each other's development that can happen. We see what quells we have about the distribution of waters, about the question of the sales tax. There is a demand that the sales tax should be converted into an excise tax. We have said we should like to do it. I have always believed in it, but unless the states agree, we cannot do it. And I do not want to take away that power of the states. Therefore, we have to go on persuading them. If they agree, then a lot of corruption and a lot of harassment to people will have gone. But there are states which are well to do, and there are states which are not well to do. The well to do states do not want this conversion, the others want the change. Now we are not thinking of the whole country. All the states do not think about it. When they begin to think about it, I am quite sure that things will be solved much more easily. But we have to work for it. Should we not see that there is a binding link for all the states which see to it that there is no division of the country or any account? And if that is also one of the purposes of the central government, it must have powers which enables it to do so. Can the military be disturbed between the states? It cannot be. But what is the demand here? When the question of law and order comes, the opposition wants to blame the treasury benches for its deterioration. The position under the constitution is that the states are responsible for law and order, but the opposition insists that we must act. Will you enable me to act in that manner? I would not like to take away those powers. We should help them in a manner to promote their interest in the state itself, and where the states fail to maintain law and order, I would rather change the government by having elections. That is how the people will come up, otherwise, they will not come up. Ultimately, our strength lies in the strength of the people. On the question of the reorganization of a state, we know what happened. These are the things which happen in this country. Today, wherever you turn, you find there is the desire for division, not unity. Should we not change it? Will the states be able to do it by themselves if they are left free? If the central government has to keep themselves back, will they be able to do it? We are not yet able to agree on a common language for all of us because we have rich languages in every state. In a big country like ours, this is inevitable. Before freedom, most of the people from all parts of India had agreed. After freedom, it is a matter of controversy. That controversy also is to be resolved by common consent, and we have to work for it. We have to go on struggling for it. But who is to work for it except the center? Will the states work for it? They cannot do it. The arrangement in the constitution is that it is like a necklace of pearls or diamonds. The string which goes through the necklace gives it strength and gives it beauty. If that string breaks, then all the pearls goes and they lose their value. That is what happens, and that is the function which the central government ought to perform. The function of the government of India cannot be to dwarf the states, it is to strengthen states, and it is in strong states and in strong center that the advantage of a country lies. The interest of a country can be preserved only when both are strong. This demand for removal of these powers or those powers is not intentionally made for any other purpose. I hope except to see that the states become stronger. I can understand that position, but it can be taken advantage of by some people to see that the country breaks. Then we shall not be able to do anything concrete here. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. The main purpose of the United Nations is to build up a world without war, a world based on the cooperation of nations and peoples. It is not merely a world where war is kept in check by a balancing of armed forces. It is much deeper than that. It is a world from which the major causes of war have been removed and social structure built up which further peaceful cooperation within a nation as well as between nations. In the preamble of the Constitution of the UNESCO, it is stated that war begins in the minds of men. That is essentially true, and ultimately it is necessary to bring about the change in our minds and to remove fears and apprehensions, hatred and suspicions. Disarmament is a part of this process, for it will create an atmosphere of cooperation, but it is only a step toward our objective, a part of the larger efforts to rid the world of war and the causes of war. In the present context, however, disarmament assumes a very special importance for us, overriding all other issues. For many years past, there have been talks on disarmament, and some progress has undoubtedly been made insofar as the plans and proposals are concerned. Still, we find that the race of armaments continues, as also the efforts to invent even more powerful engines of destruction. If even a small part of these efforts was directed to the search for peace, probably the problem of disarmament would have been solved by this time. Apart from the moral imperative of peace, every practical consideration leads us to that conclusion. For as everyone knows, the choice today in this nuclear age is one of the utter annihilation and destruction of civilization, or of some way to have peaceful coexistence between nations. There is no middle way. If war is an abomination and an ultimate crime which has to be avoided, we must fashion our minds and policies accordingly. There may be risk, but the greatest risk is to allow the present dangerous drift to continue. In order to achieve peace, we have to develop a climate of peace and tolerance and to avoid speech and action which tend to increase fear and hatred, and at the present it may not be possible to reach full disarmament in one step, though every step would be conditioned to that end. We live in an age of great revolutionary changes brought about by the advance of science and technology. Therein lies the hope for the world and also the danger of sudden death. Because of these advances, the time we have for controlling the forces of destruction is strictly limited. If within the next 3 or 4 years effective disarmament is not agreed to and implemented, then all the goodwill in the world will not be able to stop the drift to certain disaster. In the context of things as they are today, the great nations, the United States of America and the Soviet Russia, hold the key to war and peace. Theirs is a great responsibility, but every country, big or small, is concerned in this matter of peace and war, and therefore every country must shoulder its responsibility and work to this end. In order to deal with these big issues effectively, we have to take big and impersonal views. It is only the United Nations as a whole that can ultimately solve these problems. Therefore, while all efforts towards disarmament must be welcomed, the United Nations should be closely associated with such efforts. The question of disarmament has been considered at various levels. There is the question of general disarmament and of the ending of test explosions of nuclear and them nuclear weapons. So far as the test explosions are concerned, considerable progress has been made in the discussions of the committee which has been meeting in Geneva. Indeed, it would appear that an agreement has been reached on many basic issues and only a little more effort is needed to complete this agreement. I suggest that a final agreement on this subject should be reached as early as possible. This is not strictly speaking disarmament, but undoubtedly any such agreement will bring a large measure of relief to the world. Disarmament must include the prohibition of the manufacture, storage, and use of weapons of mass destruction as well as the progressive limitation of conventional weapons. It is admitted that disarmament should take place in such stages as to maintain broadly the balance of armed power. It is only on this basis that success can be achieved and this pervading sense of fear countered. It must also be clearly understood that disarmament and a machinery for control must go together, and neither of these can be taken up singly, and now a proposal has been made that the question of disarmament should be referred to a committee of experts. In fact, experts have been considering this matter during the past years, and we have had the advantage of their views. Stop.